loose ends.
We're all good.
Okay, team, thank you for making your way back to the table. Hope you had a good little coffee break, pit stop moment. We have 2 more reports and we'll try and be done by 12:30. So if we can just keep that in mind. We also do have 1 quick public excluded report as well. But yeah, these next 2, if we can try and again remember the conversations that we've had prior and also the sentiments of our public speakers and working through as efficiently as possible with these next 2 reports, that would be great. So we've got item 8.2, asset management plan, beach accessways, and as I mentioned before, we'll be seeking to put an additional recommendation into the mix, which requests council staff to provide further advice on options for the Manly Street North boat ramp at 5.4 and the asset management plan as a boat launch before a decision is sought on this specific location. So if we can also keep that in mind while we're debating, so we're not relitigating that point that I think we've heard quite loud and clear this morning. So I'll pass to, if Mike wants to do an overview, or are we going straight to Gareth and James?
Through the chair, you're stuck with me for the next 2 papers. Mike has had to go offline, so cool. I'll help out. Thanks, probably James. In some of the beaches bylaw discussion, but take the papers as read. And any questions for Gareth?
Great. Any questions, team, on the beach accessway asset management plan? Yep, there's a couple of questions. Kim Tahiwi.
Just a quick one is about, I'm assuming that the upgrade of the Otaki Pavilion and Surf Life Saving Club is not included in this. I just want to make that clear. The Otaki Pavilion, because there's a upgrade on it. I'm not sure if the Surf Life Saving Club has an upgrade.
Yeah, kia ora, Kim, through you, Madam Chair. Not directly, no. What we're doing is acknowledging that that site is actually a pretty good site for a destination beach accessway. One of the 7 identified for potential upgrade one day as a beach accessway.
Cool. Kia ora, Kim. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Kirby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question which I had asked previously, but it is related to the fixed barrier arms solutions and that option that I understand. Is it true that that is off the table at this stage because of the ongoing issues that result from putting fixed blockages in?
Thank you, through Madam Chair. There are 2 ways of looking at it. Yes, we have put pause on the barrier arms for now from a regulatory point of view in terms of it being acknowledged as a bigger issue to go through, a lot more engagement and process to go through on that side of things. However, appropriate beach access ways, alternative or suitable alternative options in certain circumstances can be quite complementary to those discussions going forward. So they're complementary but separate discussions at this stage, separate from the beach accessway AMP.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coe. Oh, sorry, you're still muted. Yeah, there we go.
All right.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, thank you. Look, I just wanted to refer to the opening paragraph on strategic alignment, where it says that all access points will be reviewed and an action plan will be developed to show which accessways to upgrade, delete or maintain. And there's a comment below that around this aspiration not having yet eventuated. I just wondered if there is still an intention to have a specific action plan for all the accessways, and when, and if that is going to be brought to council, and if it hasn't yet eventuated, why not really? I know you've mentioned some complexities there, but is it still an aspiration?
Yes, thank you once again through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, that aspirations that are cited there are directly quoted from our open space strategy, which identified it as a particular area of improvement. What this asset management plan does, though, is it's the next stage towards operationalizing how that might look. With the asset management plan introducing 3 particular categories or a scalable approach to beach accessways, it helps us rationalize those 130 current sites, 120 that are actively managed in the moment, towards that, towards achieving that. Where those all look, or what they all look like and where they are, is still going to be part of that ongoing action plan that we're talking about there. So it'll be more along the lines of an implementation plan applying the principles of the open space strategy. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
So I just want to clarify. So that means there is still quite a lot more work to be done on the detail of the treatment for each of the existing access ways?
Yes, that is correct. With 130 of them currently, we're looking at prioritising, and the approach is going to be to focus on or starting to identify and implement the 7 destination sites as a starter. There will be a lot of other work to follow.
Right. So I just want to clarify whether the prioritisation is based on the destination status or prioritisation on problem areas, such as we've heard in terms of Otaki, and of course everyone knows about Tahoro Beach access as well. So I mean, Tahoro Beach as an example is not a destination access way, but it is definitely a problem access way. So I just wanted to clarify where that perhaps fits in terms of the priorities.
So as I mentioned, I think focusing on the 7 destination parks gives us a clear target to start working towards right now. I don't want to use the word low-hanging fruit because there's a huge amount of work involved in that in its own right. What there is a whole lot of other moving parts within let's say, the beach environment, as we quite clearly heard today. There's multiple role players in certain situations. There's the bylaw, which we don't want to necessarily confuse with this asset management plan, but there are complementary aspects of the two. And that's going to require quite a bit of work around to actually develop that priority list. We also do have a global consent that's been applied for and received from Greater Wellington to allow us to do certain work. And where that consent covers activities will also help us prioritise those sites. We're limited to 20 a year, and not all sites are covered. Not all of the 130 sites are covered. So we've got the mechanism and the moving parts, lots of moving parts in the puzzle of how to prioritise, and that's what we're going to have to do next.
Okay, I would just like to make a plea for some work to be done on some of those problem sites, because as we heard in the public speaking session this morning, with the increased tourism traffic and the people coming from out of town, and the fact that we're going to have a long hot summer, we're potentially going to have a lot of issues on our beaches this summer, which as a Tahoro Beach resident, I must say I'm not looking forward to. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, Councillor Coe. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Gareth and team, for another very good report. So I'm a little bit confused. So it talks about 120 access ways. Does this exclude all the private ones that have been built by residents, or does it include them or not?
So that excludes all the private ones that we've identified.
Okay, so have you any idea how many there are, whether it's double the number or?
We wouldn't be able to, outside of doing, I suppose, high intensity satellite imagery, looking at every backyard that borders the beach. Yeah, it's
Okay.
quite a big number.
because there's no mention of how that they're going to be managed in this.
I think the Chief Executive would like to make a comment.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair. Can I please just remind the room, this is about council-owned assets and the money that we're looking to invest in council-owned assets, so not privately owned assets, but council-owned assets. If you look at the dollar values that are expressed in some of these AMPs, they're big dollars, and so that needs to be our focus. And so I just want to bring us back to that and understand how important it is that we bring these to you when we're talking about our long-term planning.
Kia ora, Darren. Thank you for that reminder. Councillor Pravanov, one more brief quick question.
So my comment in relation to that is that the sand dunes that a lot of these private access ways traverse are council either owned or maintained. So my other question relates to, I just want to double check that that access on the maps there, I think it's on page 61, that Rutherford Drive access is included. And then I'm wondering why Pika Pika Beach isn't included as one of the major beach sites or access sites.
Yeah, so when it comes to the prioritisation of the 7 beach accessways, there were 3 criteria that we used to identify those. It usually relates to current levels of utilisation that's been observed, also nearby infrastructure, and then thirdly, the ability to develop further as a particular destination site. Many of the other sites are based on an assessment that was drafted for us, independently drafted for us by coastal engineers, which identified challenges and opportunities at each of those 120 sites. It takes into account things like the distance to the next beach accessway and so on. Bearing in mind that everything that's proposed within this asset management plan, if we think of it as principles as well, a lot of the specifics, as with the likes of Manly Street, we've got some site-specific work to do on those, which would be the next truncheon of implementation, if we can call it that.
So I'm specifically asking about Pika Pika Beach. So that access, what's going to happen to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take that question offline, Councillor Pravanov, because as Gareth said, we're talking at a relatively high level with this.
Well, I
guiding
suppose the
long-term plan
question is,
discussion.
7 sites have been identified, and to me, for a lot of reasons, the fact that there is nothing between Waikanae and Otaki that is being identified here as one of these key sites.
Okay, Gareth will make a quick comment on that.
Yeah. Essentially, it didn't meet the criteria, the 3 criteria that we looked at this stage. We are dealing with a lot of beach access ways, and I'm pretty sure that everyone would want every single one of those to be as nice as possible. But we've got to, as Chief Executive rightfully mentioned, we've got to look at our area of control and also our area of investment and trying to rationalise that appropriately.
So I haven't still had an answer to what is actually happening to the access way at Pika Pika.
Well, nothing.
That will determine whether or not I actually agree with this paper or not.
Sorry, through the chair, I thought Mr. Eloff had been quite clear about prioritisation exercises, and the staff have had a look at all of them and prioritised them. And I'm happy to have the team will be happy to have an offline conversation with you, councillor. But debating priorities in a paper like this, I don't think is appropriate.
Yeah, and if you want to make those comments during debate, Councillor Pravanov, you're more than welcome. We'll have to probably move on. There's a bunch more questions lined up. Simon Black.
Kia ora. Thanks, team. Thanks for that report. It's pretty extensive. Questions, 2 of them. One of them relates back to one of the common themes, actually protecting our environment, which I believe is a priority for us. are we investigating, or should we add a recommendation in regards to investigating better signage and communication of expected behaviours on the beach, fires and camping restrictions?
Yeah. So I've drafted something up and sent it through to staff. So it would be B2. That council notes the desire of Ngā Hapu o Otaki to see council further explore educational opportunities around respecting the beach environment and requests staff to look into this.
And possibly extend that to the whole district. Actually, it looks like, it sounds like it's a district problem. The other one is rubbish bins, and increasingly I've seen rubbish bins being either burnt or destroyed, haven't been replaced. A lot of rubbish on the ground, especially the plastic dog bags with the poop in it. And also on weekends, I can see that these rubbish bins are overflowing, and you can't fit any more in. So, are we looking at maintaining our environment through better rubbish facilities?
I think because this asset management plan is solely looking at the beach accessways, maybe that's a separate operational conversation that can be had offline. But thanks for raising it, Simon.
We could obviously have that, just noted and discussed in the environment committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. Not to anticipate the Takatai Kapiti report, but the term managed retreat is likely to feature fairly prominently in that. So has that been accounted for when you're doing a consideration of accessways? And I've got one other question after.
Through Madam Chair, in short, yes. There are multiple role players in this space, and we got to look at it holistically. So when we're looking at targeted investment of particularly high value assets, we'd look into that quite closely. In fact, those 7 destination sites that was one of the major considerations too. Also with some novel approaches like having, the plan specifically mentioned things like our change in approach to the materials being used in some sites. We've historically put stainless steel handrails, for example, on sites Paraparaumu and South, whereas we know after every major event we're replacing those. So why should we be planning for a 50-year lifespan for an asset that's likely to be wiped out every storm event? So it's having those considerations as part of the operational plan, which is highlighted in the end.
Okay, thanks for that. And I was quite moved by the statement this morning by Paul Clark, and all the speakers, but Paul Clark in particular, and he seemed to raise the issue. It was really about it was an equity issue around if we institute restrictions and give people who have boats with keys, etc. And I'm not decrying that necessarily, but again, he did raise that point about, are we putting barriers in? Are we putting economic barriers in the way to access? And so I would be concerned if that wasn't considered. And just the other bit to that was, I thought Carl Webber's written response, where he talked about customary accessways, and I'm not sure if they are fully protected, where in fact they should be. So if you have a comment around that as well.
Yes, I think obviously a valid point and a valid factor for inclusion into any kind of discussion going forward. Bearing in mind we're dealing specifically with the assets associated with beach accessways at the moment. Permission and rights and all of that would be probably a supplementary but very valid and complementary conversation, but not one dealing directly with this. In some ways, we are dealing with, we are dealing with community assets. It's a right to access beaches, and what we're trying to do is have the infrastructure that can support that in as an environmentally sustainable way as possible.
Okay, thank you.
And we've just got 2 more people with questions. Councillor Halliday.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I'll be succinct, but they're actually just flags more than questions, and I'll include other things in debate. Just 2 things I wanted to flag. was just the operational area down at the boat club, and I call it an operational area rather than a car park. So the work that we're doing down there, if we can be looking at that picture of that whole access area down there, is at recently the AGM of the boat club, and they're very interested in working with KCDC with regards to how we move forward on that. So happy to introduce if need be, but I think you're already liaising with them anyway. The other one I wanted to flag too was I was just concerned about hearing about students camping up in Oldnaki because they don't have other necessary accommodation available. I know Chris Pavan's talk towards resilience with regards to having spaces that are perhaps potentially multi-purpose in case of events, so to speak. Maybe we can have a conversation around how we could potentially address that, because I think trying to ban people from an area because of need is necessarily not going to solve a problem, it's just going to move it. So I just wanted to flag that we had some conversation around that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Halliday. That was definitely succinct. Andre Baker.
Tēnā koe, Gareth. Thank you and staff for the report. Item 9 makes reference to the plan considering the impact climate change, and it references high tide. In terms of mana whenua interest here, I'm just keen to know whether or not there's an awareness that as of Monday, Ngāti Raukawa and Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai filed their briefs of evidence for their takutai mona application with the High Court. Although this specifically references access, sometimes access is restricted because of the tide. The takutai mona applications that have been filed correctly identify the responsibilities that Ngāti Raukawa and Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai exercise in terms of our exclusive traditional rights for also maintaining and providing ongoing responsibility for access and for obviously the matter concerning the title through the current Marine and Coastal Marine High Court process. I think it would be helpful for me to just note today that it may be of some advantage to have a conversation with Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai and with Ngāti Raukawa, particularly regarding the briefs of evidence that have been provided to the High Court in relation to those matters. So not necessarily in direct relationship to the asset management plan in terms of beach access, but certainly there is a considerable amount of information that has been generated regarding, I guess, what item 9 is referring to, and that is particularly the high tide stuff and the impact of tidal stuff. So could I just perhaps ask if you are comfortable to have that noted at today's meeting, and would be happy to help facilitate that engagement with Raukawa and with Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai. And I'll have to respectfully ask, Madam Chair, if I could be excused. I'm due in court shortly. Not for my fault.
But yes, of course, you're welcome to be.
I will be free to head home later.
I think Gareth did have some brief comments to make in response just before you head off.
Just saying ngā mihi nui, Matua Andre. Yes, happy for that to be noted. And I think particularly also within a wider space as well, not related to the asset management plan only, but I think in terms of our ongoing regulatory environment within that space would be very fortuitous for us to have those conversations.
Kia ora, thank you, Andre. And yeah, feel free to head off whenever you need to go. That's totally fine. All right, so we've got recommendations, which maybe if they could be popped up on the screen, that would be great, just with those additions. And they can be found on page 44. Is there someone who would be happy to move? Councillor Halliday, seconded. Deputy Mayor Kirby, right of... Sorry, I'll let you read. Yeah, no worries. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Cool. Right of introduction, if you're happy. Yeah. And a reminder too that I did feel like as people were asking their questions, there were sentiments of debate. So if we can keep comments and debate to a good level of succinctness, that'd be
I
great.
appreciated the flexibility there. Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, again, just a reflection of what I said before. Asset management plan, why wasn't there before, but it is there now, which means there's a lot of catch-up to do, which I guess is why we're going through the prioritising process. But great to see those key access points going to be addressed in the first instance. I guess a couple of things I wanted to note was the type of signage. I think there's a potential there for a tikanga type approach from Mana Whenua with regards to what the expectation and what our expectation is of the beach, followed through with, I'm sure, Facebook and other ways that we can proactively get those messages out. But what we're seeing, I dare say, is very quickly, by the sound of things. I mean, when we were talking about the beach bylaw in the last triennium, it was very much a case of the issues were down this way. We weren't hearing too much about issues up Otaki way, not to the extent that we've just heard about them as such. So I guess, we're more accessible. We've got more people living in the area. We're desirable to come to, and people are finally discovering that. And we are a very, very good place for boaties to come, for people to enjoy the beach. But with that comes responsibilities. People may not be able to park up on the beach. The congestion issues that we're going to have, et cetera, et cetera. And they'll be addressed as we move forward. But we may be needing to address these perhaps a little bit sooner than what we thought with regards to our beach bylaw, which is done every 10 years. So it's not flagging we should look at it next year, but we're going to try other mechanisms before that as such. But it certainly seems to me like our beach areas are going to become more and more popular, especially considering we haven't even exercised a tourism strategy in this space yet. We're going to be inviting people to the area. So we're going to have to be very, very, very careful about how we do that. So other than that, fantastic piece of work, and like the idea of the platforms, view platforms, that sort of stuff. And something else I wanted to also address actually was, and something we didn't really pull through the beach bylaw, was disability access and the access to the beach for our elderly and that sort of stuff. We need to make allowances for that to happen from a viewing perspective or an interaction perspective. So I just wanted to flag that as well. Other than that, great piece of work. Thank you very much.
Yep, total call all of that. Deputy Mayor Kirby.
I just want to say thanks to staff for this. Again, asset management plan, I'm conscious that it fits in amongst a whole myriad of other things that feed into this, the beach bylaw being one, the open space strategy, tourism access, historical access for people who have lived here for a while, and places that they've been able to go and enjoy our beaches without restriction in the past that may change as population has changed. And so I think this is a hugely challenging area, but I don't think there's any debate that as a community we value our beaches. And so for me, this work around managing access and ensuring that our access ways are fit for purpose and the best that we can have, I think is really important. But this will be an ongoing conversation, I think, that we will need to be having really strongly with our community in light of the things like Takutai Kapiti, the changes we've got there, the population stresses that we'll be putting on our beaches, the need for looking after our kaimoana and the ocean and our environment and all of that, the tensions that exist there. I think this is a really challenging space. But thank you again to staff in terms of this particular piece of work. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor Coe.
Thank you. Yes, look, I totally agree with what you said, Councillor Kirby. I think this is a step in the right direction, and it's a very complex area that needs a lot more work and probably a lot more resource thrown at it. And one of the issues in terms of educational opportunities is that the people we need to educate are largely out of towners or people out of district, so to speak. So it's not easy to to have that as a goal to educate people. Yes, we can educate local people, but the locals tend to know what's the right thing to do and what's not. So yeah, anyway, the point I would like to make here is that I am really concerned about the prioritisation criteria. I know we do have to prioritise because it would require a very large amount of money to resolve issues in relation to all 130 access points, but prioritising it just on destination and tourist attraction to me is failing to acknowledge the impact on our environment of some of these beach access ways. And I would like to see an additional list put together of those access points where there are significant problems in terms of damage to our environment, and to see some additional resource allocated to those access points. I think, you know, we're at a tipping point with some of our some of those access ways in terms of potential damage, and the sooner we address those issues, the better. So I'm not sure whether it requires an additional recommendation or an alteration to the recommendations, but I would certainly like to see that incorporated in some way. I'm not quite sure how we deal with that at this point in time, but to me that's really, really important. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely been noted by staff. Councillor Coe, if you did have specific wording that you wanted to put forward, maybe send that to Gem Services. But I think, as James Jefferson has just assured me, it's been noted, and will be further conversations can be had. So hopefully that will suffice.
Well, yeah, I'm happy if there is going to be further work done on that. You know, I would like to see.
Yeah. It'll be brought back.
Yeah, a priority list.
Yeah, that can be brought back. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, through the chair. So, you know, so this has obviously been a big piece of work, and I think very grateful that it's been brought to us. At the CES subcommittee meeting last week, we covered this topic, but we weren't able to see the management plan at that point in time. I suppose in relation to our beaches and beach access, as someone who was around when we went through the bylaw process in 2021, it's really quite a volatile topic, and polarises people quite well. I suppose I agree with, I support what Councillor Coe has just said in terms of looking at the prioritisation of some of these key access points. And I think part of the issue, as has been shown by some of the photographs in the document, is slash that occurs on our beaches. And I think that, you know, is an issue that, unless it's addressed either by this council in terms of our conversations with GW, that will only continue. And so I think there are a whole lot of arms here that we need to look at. The other thing too that I want to make comment about is, I'm not actually really sure that we actually need to actually have any comment about Manly Street, because in our beach bylaw, it was said that is an access way for launching boats. And so it's my understanding that actually supersedes this management plan. So as it stands, unless we're going to change the beach bylaw. So that's really all I have to say. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pravanov. Glenn Olsen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, good work on this. And, you know, majority of it I'm quite supportive of. There are a few things, though. And one thing is, you know, I wouldn't say there are too many access points, but I would say there are probably more than we need, and there is a difference between there. So, you know, targeted of some of them, you know, going away, you're looking at which ones there are, because I know there are some areas, even down Manly Street, where there just seems to be one after another, and some of them are pretty hard to use, actually, and pretty long. So, yeah, on that side of it, you know, reviewing those I'm quite supportive of. But I think, you know, if we do look at Manly Street in 5.4 and the recommend on this, yeah, the community board is very supportive of this recommendation and of that access point staying open. And I think we can see from the public speakers and that the community itself is, you know, very much wants this access point to stay open, and it's very clear. In fact, I couldn't put my hand up and say I've had one person from the public ever come up to me and say that it needs to be closed. Yeah, but many people saying that they want to see it open, and it has been there a long time. And you know, the nearest one is down at the boat club, and there's some issues with that, especially when you're talking about disability access. You know, people going down there who can't walk down to the beach or go down with another method. If your only way to look at the beach and the ocean is to go by vehicle, there is nowhere in Paparam where you can drive up to the beach and look. You've got really a little bit at the boat club, but it's unsafe. On a busy day, that's the last place you want people going down there, taking elderly who can't get down there otherwise to review. I know there's been some talk about creating viewing platforms. Again, it helps, but they're not accessible for a lot of people. You know, if you've got somebody who can't easily get out of the car, these are not accessible unless you can drive up to them. And, you know, when they're slightly wet or anything else, they become a health and safety risk for the other people. And also, people do like to go down to the beach sometimes on a day when it's not so nice and just sit there and look at storms. It's lovely, you know. You need to be able to drive up to the beach to be able to see that. On the cost of it, you know, the cost of maintaining it, I'm looking at it, it's very small, $2,000 each time. There's not that many events. And in fact, if you look at the overall budget, you know, that is a very small amount of money. And let's not forget that the money is not the council's money. It's the ratepayer who's paying for it. And it's the ratepayer who are saying they want to keep it open. So when we say we don't have money, we are, because we are collecting money from the ratepayer, and they're the ones who are paying for it. It's not the council. Yeah, so very important there. People often speak about it as being the council's money, but it's not the council's money. It's the ratepayers. And on that, I did see where it says that at the moment it's maintained by a district-wide rate. Well, you know, there's no reason that some of these, and this is an example of one, couldn't be a targeted rate, because I can imagine them, you know, we're looking at a couple of $1,000s event, maybe, you know, 5,000 a year, put that into a long-term plan. It's going to be minimal, and I'm pretty sure that there'll be very few people who would be against that as a targeted rate. In fact, if it came to it, and I look at the budget for the Paparan Community Board, they were actually collecting $6,000 a year for a camera in Paparan that doesn't exist. Repurpose that money for just specifically for this. There's money there now which has been collected from the ratepayer for something that is not happening. You know, make good use of that. Put it back to and give it back to the community. If we need money to maintain it, I'm pretty sure the Paparan Community Board were very supporters of that money being used and refocused. So the last thing I'd like to say as well, coming back to disability, is that as far as the bylaw of it saying it is for boat launching, I would really say at some point, instead of looking at restricting it, we should go out and consult and talk to them about opening for the disability, for parking and access for the disability specifically. Not for all of the public, but for those, you know, with disability, you know, cards and stuff, because, as I said, there's nowhere else in Paparam where it's safe for these people to go. So,
Thanks,
thank you.
Kim Tahiwi.
Kia ora. Yeah, just want to talk all the comments made around the table, but from a mana whenua perspective, the priority is the beach, the land and the water and everything that lives in it, on it, around it and under it. It's not about us, it's about us learning to respect what's already there. So we've already noted that education and monitoring is the preferred option over restrictions and maybe more bylaws that people will ignore anyway. So it's not about stopping use, it's about respecting what's there. So noting that you've already started that collaborative process, so just hope that we can have a collaborative solution design process, which has to include local taiao experts, as we've seen from people speaking today. And, you know, you're already tapping into the takutai, and there's other forums that are saying the same stuff. So making sure we're looking at all that stuff so that we're looking at this from a holistic point of view. I know it's only beach access, this is paper, but if we look at it from a holistic point of view, then we can tap into the other impacts that beach access has on the asset, which is the land, the beach and the water. So that should be the focus, not getting our cars and boats and fishing rods down to the beach to use it. That's all.
Kia ora, Kim. We've just got Mayor Holbrook and then Councillor Wilson, and then we'll look to vote on the recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Just a few really brief comments. I'd just like to bring us back to the fact that this isn't a beach bylaw discussion. I've done 2, maybe 3 beach bylaws now, and that's where we talk about the environment. That's where I remember, particularly in the first one, we talked about penguins in Paikakariki. Huge topic for debate. And that's where a couple of years ago we did that again. and really thought really carefully about where we put these beach accesses, how they fit into the environment, and all those wider considerations which encourage people to do the right thing, whether they ignore it or not. So I just want us to bring us back to that, because this is about how we get people down onto the beach. And I would like to point to page 68, where it says, in all cases, protection of the special coastal environment is of the utmost concern. A central premise of the development is that it would enhance the environment by containing human impact. And to me, that's a completely appropriate way of covering that off in this document and making sure that that's what underpins these considerations. I don't think we need to come back with further information about that. I don't want to create a huge piece of work for council staff, because this is about access. It's about getting onto the beach, and I'd like us to stay focused on that. I'm happy with that recommendation at C, particularly as we're adjusting something that did go through a lot of discussion through the beach bylaw. So I think it's appropriate that if we're going to reconsider that we put a bit more consideration and engagement into that. So happy with these recommendations today, and endorse this document and everything in that.
Thanks, Mayor Holbrook. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, well, largely reiterating what Janet's just said, actually, but...
well, then maybe keep it short if you can.
As always. As Kim was saying, it is about respect for the environment and your access to that environment, which is a bit of a gift, actually, that we have access to it, public accessways. So it is about education, but it's also about enforcement. And we've seen situations in the past where there hasn't been enforcement. There's been an abuse of public accessways. And as soon as people started screaming, we backed away. And I would like to think that we can hold the line on some of this stuff. So education is really important, but so is enforcement. The bigger picture about what it is that we're trying to protect, not just how we get to it, but what we do to it when we get there. That's all for me.
Cool. Kia ora, Councillor Wilson. Right of reply. Oh, good. I was going to say. Alrighty, so we've got now 4 recommendations, and they've been moved by Councillor Halliday, seconded by Councillor Kirby. All those in favour? Aye. Against? On Zoom. Against?
Yeah. No, good.
That's carried. All right. Thank you. One more. Oh, yeah.
If you may indulge me, Madam Chair, I just did want to pick in Councillor Wilson's and some of the comments that have been made. As we speak, our new environmental compliance manager, Richard Hopkins, is meeting with the reasonably new police operational Senior Sergeant Ros Whitley. I've asked that we set up a joint summer activity task force to do the monitoring and, where we can, enforcement. And as much as gathered data to bring back and put into some of these things. So I didn't want to get into that debate during debate or thing. So, but I just wanted to give you that assurance.
Thank you. Sweet, thanks for that, James. Alrighty, so now moving on to 8.3, Asset Management Plan, Recreational Tracks and Trails, noting that this has also been to the Climate and Environment Subcommittee, and that there are a number of different conversations and viewpoints on this, and also that we aren't making any commitment either to or not to increase or decrease funding in this area through this asset management plan. It's helping to guide those conversations that we will have in the very near future. So we're not going to be able to solve all of the networks issues within this asset management plan, nor within this conversation today. So just wanting to really preface this with that, I guess. So we'll pass to Gareth and the team.
Once again, ngā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa. I will largely take this as read and happy to take any questions, but maybe just to reiterate that it's quite encouraging from my point of view to see the passion that these subjects bring to the table, both from the community and also councillors. It kind of reaffirms what we're doing and why we're doing it. So, thank you for the interest and happy to take any questions.
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of interest. So great to see that acknowledged, and from a number of different standpoints, both the tourism standpoint, the environmental standpoint, emissions reduction, connectedness of our district. So thanks for acknowledging that. Questions, Mayor Holborough?
Yeah, I just wanted to cover off, just ask a couple of questions about the follow through from the Climate and Environment Subcommittee. There was a bit of discussion around increasing investment in the scale and scope of this work. Do you think that's covered under C, notes that recreational tracks and trails, B, notes that officers are seeking advice on establishing a trails trust? Would that cover the concerns that were raised in the Climate and Environment Subcommittee and allow for that scope to increase this work?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I believe so, but also acknowledging that the recreation tracks and trails is one aspect of a very large network, and there are multiple avenues for funding and scope that need to be considered as part of the wider network. This is particularly focusing on the non-subsidised areas that are partly owned by council, but the majority being, let's say, partner organisations like GW. RC and also DOC.
And just a second question, if I might. If we, through the long-term plan process, which would be the appropriate place to decide on scope and scale of work, decided to put more resources in, what would be the impact on this asset management plan today?
Thank you once again, through Madam Chair. It'll enhance it. But we do also have other opportunities that are highlighted within the asset management plan for funding of new and upgrades, growth-related assets to be enhanced or upgraded to accommodate growth. That's through financial contributions. Bearing in mind that we do, through the Resource Management Act, levy financial contributions for open space provision, which is not debt funded. So we highlighted that in the plan.
Thank you.
And thanks for signalling that, Mayor Holborough, because I think there are a few people around the table, myself included, who through the long-term plan process are keen to keep having the conversation about upping investment in our wider CWB network and tracks and trails being included in that. So thanks for bringing that into the mix. Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, one's a flag and one's clarity. Look, I just wanted to flag that it's great to see the word partnerships in there and that we're looking for partnerships. We've got a lot of people up in those hills that are own land. I think, and I know certain people that would be very happy in that partnership, and it not being a one-sided sort of thing. They're in real joint partnership too. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I just wanted clarity on B. It says notes that officers are seeking advice on establishing a Trails Trust. I think this is a fantastic idea, and it's part of a new approach that we're taking. Are you wanting an answer today about this? Because I'm quite keen. I just wanted to clarify by us doing the recommendations. Is that giving permission for this to move ahead? Because I would quite like to be able to do that.
Exploratory work, so it's giving the okay to continue the exploration.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Quite happy to say yes, but no exploratory work. Okay.
Yeah, well, we could kind of give that direction that yes, but let's keep it moving without delay, really. Kim Tahiwi.
It's just about the increased investment. So you touched on that there's other pockets of funding where could kind of potentially increase the investment on the tracks and trails. So do you take that wider, like in terms of, I'm thinking in terms of the destination plan, tourism budgets and all those kind of budgets. Do you have any idea across the board, from a holistic perspective, what kind of increased investment could be attributed to the tracks and trails through other work streams?
Through you, Madam Chair, not offhand, and that would probably be more akin to a question for our economic development partners who are looking to things like feasibility studies and the impact that this Tracks and Trails network would have on the district-wide economy and opportunities.
And are you likely to be looking at that or not?
Yeah,
cool.
yes, it's definitely one of the. I mean, our approach at the moment that we take operationally is we look at our recreation tracks, or let's call it the CWB network, as a three-legged stool. Recreation tracks are one of them. Our subsidised network with roading is the other, and economic development is the third.
Right. That's all.
Deputy Mayor Kirby.
Just a question for me, thank you, Madam Chair. Just of clarity, this is another draft AMP. Can you help me with when they become final?
I can have a crack at that through the chair. Really, the LTP is the way that you embed these and make them more official. But we can go back to Mike and have a question, or maybe Gareth can answer it now as to whether we think these would be polished off. And I suspect I know the answer, to be able to embed fully. But they change too. You know, they change over the years.
That's what I'm concerned about. Are they always going to be draft? I don't mind it being that, or is it we just class them as a living document that's going to have changes and will be updated on them as they go?
I don't think any change would happen outside an annual plan or an LTP process.
Okay.
That would be the way we'd have to do it, with the exception of some wriggle room within budgets. You know, if there were some other priorities coming through and something was prioritised. But I imagine the team would come and talk with you about that if it was significant.
Great. Thank you for the clarity.
It's probably, James has covered, every 3 years as part of the LTP process, we have asset management plans that are refreshed as we work through that. And I think Gareth mentioned there's an improvement plan in the asset management plan that sets out, I guess, the work program over the next 3 years that will feed into the review and the update in as part of the long-term plan process.
Yeah, it does answer the question. So I assume that means that these will come in as part of the LTP and we'll approve them as final. Am I clear on that?
Elements of them will.
James is nodding, so yes. Great, thank you.
No.
Oh, Sean's shaking his head.
So I don't believe there's an intention to bring back another round of approvals back to the council in terms of these plans. My understanding is today is that opportunity, and once they've been through this committee, they'll then be converted to final and then locked in.
Because we've got to assign budget. Yeah.
Yeah. But the document in its entirety won't come back to a committee of council to be approved.
But individual parts of it might.
That causes a bit of a problem for me then, because we're approving a draft AMP, and at some point we have to approve a final. If that's going to happen just at a staff level, that's got to be noted somewhere, that we're actually approving or recommending staff to make the final AMP based on this draft one without any significant changes. Surely that has to be a recommendation.
Well, you could embed that process in the LTP, the final report, and that comes back to council.
Yeah.
I'm happy to take that offline and we can get some clarity around that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, but if you did want it to potentially pull together some wording for something to add, feel free to do that and just send it through to Dem Services. But if you're happy to do this offline, I think that would be the most useful way of progressing.
I'm conscious that this is one of many AMPs that with some of them we've already done. And apologies, I hadn't asked this question of clarity earlier around the process from them moving from draft to something else. So I don't want to cause problems. It's probably just something that for us to be aware of.
Yeah. Darren.
So, thank you. Look, so Sean's on the mark. So we bring the draft AMPs for you to consider through committee council. The long-term plan document, which is huge, will have reference to all of the amps in there, which we finalise and adopt as part of that process. But we won't specifically bring every document back to you like we are doing at this stage.
Councillor Halliday.
Through you, Madam Chair, share clarity thing on my last question. I was maybe a little bit flippant about it. Look, coming back to B with regards to establishing a Trails Trust, could I get an indicator of where there might be a decision point on this? Is it at the long-term plan process, or will it potentially be before then? I'm aware that trusts can take a little while to put together, and you know, and they're relatively, when I say standard in approach, I think most people know what's involved with a trust as such. I want to know whether permissions needed to be given to just establish one, or where that might come in as such.
I can have a crack at talking with Mr. Mendonça last week after SAS. I got the very firm impression, councillors, that the establishing the trust, as you say, will take some time, and this might be a year 2 piece of work, but it's not likely to get baked into this year 1 of this LTP. Again, we can clarify that.
Is there any purpose to bring that forward in regards to a decision for that, regardless of when it fits into the long-term plan, so to speak? In other words, getting the process moving.
So getting the okay from us so the rest of it can sort of flow.
Yeah. I appreciate that when it's actually implemented will be relevant to going through a process, that sort of stuff. Just at what point does that start? Not necessarily the implementation of it, it's more the putting the structure in place as such.
Yeah, brief response, and then I wonder if we can continue this conversation offline.
Through the chair, I think there's quite a bit of work to cobble together something that you know what you're approving.
Cool.
And we should take it offline, I think.
No, happy to do
Sounds
that.
good.
That's cool.
Thanks, Councillor Halliday. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again for this report and for bringing it to the Climate and Environment Subcommittee. I just want to provide some feedback on setting up a trust.
Just a reminder, Councillor Pravanov, we're in question time.
Yes, yeah, I know.
Cool.
So I would like to refer to page 97 that actually shows the timeline for developing, establishing a trust. I think there might be, I think the years might have a 24, 26 might be slightly wrong. So my question is, why is it going to take basically 3 years to set up a trust, as indicated by this timeline here? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Through what we're looking at doing is bringing in options, 25, 26, and just noting that by the time we click print on the report, that 24 had been altered to 25. So
right.
Acknowledging that, so it's 25, 26.
Thank you. And then I see the next line below, it says development projects and project plans with new and upgrade trails to meet future demand. That's got no priority. I suppose my question around that there is, if it's going to take some time for to establish a trails trust, in the meantime, we've got subdivisions occurring all the time, and there needs to be, is there a strategy in place to actually identify literally these strategic trails then? That's my first part of the question too. And as was identified at our CES subcommittee meeting on Tuesday, there's actually a draft management, a draft strategy, I think it is, or a document. When is that actually going to be brought to council to be finalised? Two parts to that, in the short term and the strategic plan, which needs to be fed into any trails trust, so that people have an idea about where we're heading.
Yeah, noted. Over to Gareth.
Yes, so I think the plan that you're referring to is referenced in the AMP, where we're talking about the network of recreation trails that was actually put forward as quite a very strong vision that the CWB advisory group had championed and got a lot of support for. That network, it's worth noting once again that there's only about 5% of it is actually on council-owned assets or council-owned land. So we do need to establish those ongoing relationships with our partners around how we can deliver the wider network. It does have I think it's an intention or an intent that's quite clearly noted, but the delivery mechanism is going to be quite open to opportunity as that arises. So one of the things to highlight with the priority that you mentioned in the developed projects plans for new and upgraded trails to meet future demand, that's noting that it needs to happen, but that would also largely be guided by the Trails Trust themselves if and when they get established. And then also in terms of aiding the prioritisation going forward, there is also the feasibility study that tourism's looking into that'll be complementary to this piece of work as well.
So I suppose my question is that, again, if this is a trust is going to take 3 years to set up, what is going to happen in the interim when potential tracks and trails, CWB opportunities are going to be missed?
Yeah, feel free to answer, but I feel like maybe this is a conversation we can have in another forum too, in a more
Look, I might have a crack if I think I understand the councillor's question. Certainly through the consenting process for new subdivisions, always looking for that connectivity and work closely in-house with the Parks and Open Spaces team, but happy to take anything else offline with Councillor Provanov.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Provanov. Councillor Wilson, and then I'll look for someone to move the recommendations.
Yeah, just a couple of flags I'd raise. I'm just wondering if there seems like there might be some resistance to a trust. I was just wondering if there is any. Gareth was just saying, if and when they get established, I would have thought that. So that's the first question. Is there any resistance to having a trust?
Yeah, just to reply to that, probably a poor choice of words on my part. I probably should have said how and when, not if and when.
Okay, so that being the case, it would have struck me that it makes sense to establish this sooner rather than later, particularly given that 95% it's not on our land. These are developers. So, and we are about to experience accelerated development. We're about to see more and more of the land taken over to development. If we don't front foot this, then we will continue to have to work around developers rather than working through developments. So I'm really not sure why you wouldn't want to establish this trust soon. And for the life of me, I can't see why 3 years would be required. But anyway, that's another conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Wilson. I think the kind of general sentiment around the table is, as Gareth, you mentioned at the beginning of your korero, that it's something we're all quite passionate about, and it's reflected in our top 10 strategic priorities, and want to see work in this area progress with some certainty and also with pace as well. Did you have?
No, I was just going to say I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Oh. Okay, cool. So moved. Wow. Unless anyone else has any other contributions or questions, sorry. Cool. Moved by Mayor Holborough, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kirby. Right of introduction.
I won't say much. I'll just say, obviously, we're keen as on a trust.
Keen as. Second that. All those in favour? No, okay. Anyone else want to speak? No.
Yeah, why not?
Oh, really? Hang on, can I just remind you that it is 12:20? Yeah, but we've got a public exclusive report.
Hey, look,
Okay,
great to see partnerships. Great to see the trust is going to be established. Great to see the piece of work. Fantastic stuff. Look forward to taking a bike and going for a ride.
Okay, thanks. That wasn't too bad. I was expecting this. Okay, sweet. So, Okay, recommendations on page 74, moved by the Mayor, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Did you want to say something? Oh, okay. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you so much. Okie doke. So item number 9. Sorry, we're just going to keep going, but feel free to... Yeah. Item number 9, confirmation of minutes on page 98, confirming the minutes of the 19th of October 2023. Yeah, happy to move. Seconded by the Mayor. Any debates, any questions, anything wrong with those minutes? No. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That is carried. So now we need to move into public excluded. I'll move that we do so. Seconded Councillor Halliday. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That is carried. We'll turn off the live streaming.